So good morning, everybody. It's Sunday morning here in London, just after 9 o'clock. Lizzie and I are here for what is accurately, I think I said this last week, is now week 63 of Turning Towards Life. I'm away from home in Suffolk, visiting our very dear friend and partner in Third Space, Nina. So I'm in the beautiful countryside, very happy to be here. And what else to say? Something I say every time. Deeply, deeply glad that we have this opportunity, this practice of mine and Lizzie's of talking with one another every Sunday morning, and that you join us. So thank you very much, everyone who's with us and everyone who's watching later. We're really glad to be here.
So, good morning, everybody, and thank you, as always, for being here. Justin and I just had this hilarious conversation about all of the kind of various bits of crap that appear in the background of my screen. And there was a big box of wires here, all exposed, and you know those wires. I don't even know where they go or what they're for or whatever, but they feel like they can't be thrown away because they might be needed one day. Well, that box is there, and I just, before we went live, I just threw that tartan blanket over them to make it look tidier. So I thought I would just disclose that because it makes everybody maybe feel a bit better also about the crap mess that they might have in their own life, which I have plenty of, by the way. Anyway, I'm so glad to be with you all and to be with Justin this morning and to be also bringing the source of my sisters. We had this conversation yesterday and she said, "Oh, Lizzie, I feel famous now. You and Justin are using my poem." And I was like, no, we're famous more because we're using your poem. It's quite very funny, this whole famous thing. It's such a strange, stupid conversation, but we enjoy having it with one another as a way of amusing ourselves. But Holles wrote this poem and she stuck it on her blog, and then somehow it went completely viral. So if you Google, could you just love me like this? There are like hundreds of pages that come up with her poem on it, and some are credited as it being hers and some aren't. And it has gone so far around the world, it's extraordinary. And she gets messages every day from people saying, "Thank you for this poem, it means so much to me." And as soon as I read it, I burst out crying and realised how much terrible hard time I'm giving myself. And so I'm really grateful that we have this to work with and that we can talk about it together. It's a very delicate, meaningful, sensitive conversation, I think. And I'm very grateful for Hollie, for her honesty and straightforwardness around bringing stuff to do with the body, which we often ignore in our general life discourse because it is so awkward for most of us to talk about our bodies and to be in them. So I'm very grateful for this source.
I have to ask you, Lizzie, before we go on and decide who's going to read first, when Hollie's poem gets spread virally and doesn't get credited to her, does it get credited to other people?
No, it doesn't. They say source unknown or something.
Source unknown. Because I saw a wonderful quote from an author who I really like, which was attributed to the Dalai Lama, completely incorrectly. And I reckon that the Dalai Lama gets a lot of other people's work accredited to him. So I will wait for the day that Hollie's poem is accredited to the Dalai Lama or someone else.
Or someone else.
We'll
I just might put my name after it as well. That might be quite good. Yes. Nick it outright.
That's called theft. But anyway. So, do you want to read first or second this morning?
I am happy to read first. Okay, so here we go. So if you're listening somewhere where you could sit down, take a deep breath and see how this moves you as we read it. Today, I asked my body what she needed, which is a big deal, considering my journey of not really asking that much. I thought she might need more water, or proteins, or greens, or yoga, or supplements, or movement. But as I stood in the shower reflecting on her stretch marks, her roundness where I would like flatness, her softness where I would prefer firmness, and all those conditioned wishes that form a bundle of never quite rightness, she whispered very gently, "Could you just love me like this?"
So as has been our way, I'm going to read this too. There's something about hearing and feeling the same piece of work told through different voices and different bodies. And I'm going to say the same thing as Lizzie, which is that if you didn't yet do this and you're listening to us, maybe just take a moment to settle and soften and open and feel contact with your own bodily presence, which you might do in a very simple way, just by, if you're sitting, feel the way that you're supported in whatever you're sitting in, and feel your feet, and then just breathe. And so many of us are in the world in a way that has us barricaded, braced against the world. And this is an invitation into another orientation here. And the other thing to say is you can always find our sources on our little micro website, turning towards .life. So if you're watching later and want to pause and find it, you can follow along. Today, I asked my body what she needed, which is a big deal considering my journey of not really asking that much. I thought she might need more water, or proteins, or greens, or yoga, or supplements, or movement. But as I stood in the shower reflecting on her stretch marks, her roundness where I would like flatness, her softness where I would prefer firmness, all those conditioned wishes that form a bundle of never quite rightness, she whispered very gently, "Could you just love me like this?"
So what immediately springs into my imagination and heart about this is that it feels to me like this is an opening, a possibility, a different kind of horizon than we are normally used to around our bodies. So when Hol says, "Could you just love me like this?" it feels like that's the opportunity to break the cycle, at least for a day or a minute or something, of I'm so unhappy with my stretch marks, my roundness, my softness, all of the not quite rightness, that I continue to project that not quite rightness on myself. And then that means that I devalue my body and can do whatever I like with it in the name of self-hatred or self-abandonment or self-rejection. And then I start the whole thing again of, I could eat crap, I could abuse myself some other way with no sleep, or literally talking to myself with that voice triggers actions that are aligned with the voice of the opposite of self-love. And for me, what this represents is that moment where I could step away from disliking myself and therefore acting in line with dislike about my body, and that I could find a place of kindness, of acceptance, and of appreciation, that in that narrative I might take loving action towards my body. I might feed it with something else. And of course, this is a possibility that's made. And I think the stuff around our bodies and eating and the way we treat ourselves and the way we judge ourselves for how we look is a very big thing. But it feels like if it doesn't start with some kind of possibility like this, how do you ever break the never-ending cyclical nature of the way that we treat ourselves. So I'm feeling that invitation to some other realm of self-love, of physical self-love, of self-appreciation of a bump or a roundness or a softness or a saggy bit or a wrinkly bit or whatever it is. And be in that experiment. Can I just love myself like this, actual now? Not like the version of myself that I want to be, or that I think I should be, or that I think other people think I should be. But what about me loving this one just the way that it is right now?
That's beautifully said, Lizzie. It's really moving to hear you speak like that, and I'm really moved, deeply moved by Hollie's poem. And there's a move in Hollie's poem. It's so beautifully, generously written. And I want to just bring in that there's this really extraordinary move that she makes in it that is reflected in what you're saying, that I want to draw really particular attention to. You see Lizzie's coughing away here. So early on in the poem, she says, I haven't got it in front of me to quote exactly, but I thought my body might need more, and then a long list. And the exquisite and absolutely necessary move at the end is where Hollie allows her body, our own bodies, to ask something of us. Because it seems to me, at least this is I know that this is my own relationship with my own body and also myself in so many different ways, is something more, something different is called for. I ought to be fitter, stronger, a different shape, look different, have more hair, all of this. And we live in a culture which has been body shaming for a really long time. If you grew up in the West, body shame was going by the time of the ancient Greeks. And the West has been caught in this tradition in so many different ways. It's come through some forms of Christianity into our culture. It's come through, more recently, it's come through advertising and marketing culture, which is almost totally founded on the premise that something's wrong and you have to set it right. And when you set it right, everything will be okay and people will love you. So we've got all of that vast background that's around all the time that we've all been apprenticed into, that's so hard to work with. And then even sometimes when we come across a poem like Hollie's, there's a misuse that's possible to make of this, which is now I have to love myself more. Like, I'm now going to pile another kind of shame on, that I don't even love myself enough, and I've got to strive not only to have to be the right shape and all of that, because that's what our culture tells us. I now have to be a better kind of self-loving person. So I really appreciate that in Hollie's way of saying it, what the move that is possible is when we soften and stop striving so much and allow ourselves to be here and present with ourselves, that sometimes we can hear this whisper that comes from something of ourselves that's outside of the whole narrative of more, better, fix myself, improve myself, all of that, which says very, very quietly and very quietly, I'll stop there. Could you just love me, please?
Mm.
And then when we respond to that call, like we might respond to a request from anyone who we know ourselves as loving already, something else can come from it.
Mm.
In order to do that, we have to, and this is really built in very powerfully to Hollie's work here, is we have to know ourselves not just as one something.
Mm.
There's never just a one me who's at odds with the world or wrong, or we are many, and it's the relationships between the different aspects of the many somethings that we are all the time, which is where love can be. or rejection. And I feel really moved and drawn into that possibility of loving relationship by being in contact with the honesty, the straightforward truthfulness and care that's in Hollie's very beautiful words here.
And I know Hollie would call this line, she would call it her guidance. So a voice that's present, that's not of the order of more or superego or inner critic. There's something other. And it kind of is linking into the conversation that I think I've been in recently and done in some way my best to bring it here. It's a tricky one for me though, which is when you reach the bottom of the pit of self-attack or defendedness or whatever kind of very strong personality / ego pattern of fear, something else has to be born at certain points. It seems to me like when you've got nowhere else to turn, a different voice has to appear, a different kind of presence has to make itself known because the rest of the avenues are used up. And for me, this poem represents that place of, I give myself such a hard time for such a long time. There has to be another way. There has to be another part of this that I can, another part of life that must be available here because this isn't working anymore. The way I'm treating myself, the way I speak to myself, it doesn't seem to be the right thing any longer. What else is there? And then this kind of faithful listening. And as you say, Justin, some other voice gets to speak, some other relationship gets to be created with something other than just this lonely, fearful, separate one. Something else, the elseness gets born. And I think this is where this question of could you just love me like this comes from, which is a place that's kind of unspeakable but real to me and feels very possible. But it doesn't feel like that habitual everyday voice that is frightened or anxious or self-correcting in that really mean way. But it's a kindness, something loving, something that has the power to break a cycle of us being in a mistaken relationship with ourselves, that we have to look better or we have to be better or we have to be more or get more or look good or something. It's a different kind of presence that we all have access to at any point, and yet it's so hard. But this stopping that you invited us to feels to me like a way in. And in a way, this conversation is a way in to that presence, which is not being mean to us, which is not the harsh voice, which is not the belittling voice or the disbelieving voice or the unfaithful voice or the self-attack or the self-defending or the smallening or the belittling and grabbing onto the kind of the last vestiges of power that you might have in your self-attack and your righteousness. It's a different kind of gentleness. And Holles says in the poem as well, whisper and gently. And whisper and gently feel like they are of that realm. This isn't some gross, booming, definitive voice. This is something that we have to listen for. We have to create the relationship, like you're saying, to the otherness, to the else, something elseness, to presence that allows us to be in that relationship and be in that conversation to receive whatever that gift is.
Yes, I think that's right. When we can quiet enough and be gentle enough, we might have a chance of hearing it. And I think a lot of us, I know I get caught in this so much, not realizing, not catching that the harsh voice with which I'm talking to myself Or said another way, the harsh voice which I'm paying attention to is crowding out other voices, other kinds of presence which are here. And that the harsh, the superego or inner critic or judge, or there are lots of different words for the parts of us from which we speak, that's never going to be the part that is going to see this way or feel this way. And it was occurring to me just now that our bodies have been made into our culture into vast territory for commercialism. But very few of us relate to our bodies as, well, let me say it this way, it's hard to relate to our bodies as this miraculous, life-sustaining, totally unlikely way of being in the world that gives us life, and that is only here and only possible because of all the bodies that came before us, that lived long enough to bring us into the world. It's so hard to be in contact with the miracle of it when we're bombarded all the time with images of how bodies should look, and promises that if we were to alter our bodies or dress them in a very particular way, or join up to this or that miracle program, or eat or drink this miracle thing, or then our lives would be together and perfect. It's become the shame and fear about our bodies sells so much, it's so tied into our economy that we have to work really hard and be in conversations like this, I think, also, in order to reclaim some of the sense of miraculousness that was lost. And the miraculousness of anybody, whatever shape, whatever size, whatever softness, whatever firmness, whatever strength or illness, whatever, all of that. Our bodies are still exquisite miracles, a trillion cells acting in cooperation to bring about a living, moving, thinking, feeling, relating being. But boy, is that absent from what surrounds us, the sea in which we swim. So it's countercultural, of course. I mean, it's massively countercultural to talk in this way. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Hollie's poem has taken the life that it has, because it also speaks into a deep, deep, deep longing that we have to be in a gentle, tender, loving relationship with anything or with anyone. And what a place to start is right here.
And if you think of the percentage of the population that has the kind of bodies that are in Glamour magazine or Hello magazine or whatever, it's teeny tiny. Most humans have like variety.
Human-shaped bodies.
Yeah, we have like all kinds of shaped bodies.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful how that little section of the world has got so much power over determining how we feel about our bodies. And I was in the theatre last night, and it occurred to me that maybe our most personal problems are the most universal ones, and therefore they're the ones that need to be most spoken about.
Yeah.
And this is such a personal thing, and it's so universal. And that's my theory about Holmes' poem going viral, is that people are relieved to see something that is not of the narrative that you're talking about. That is a narrative that opens something other than the demand to be a certain way, that then feeds this voice of more this and more that and more this and more that. And it feels very meaningful and part of our mission in this realm of turning towards life and third space and our coaching work, to bring openness to this kind of topic, and particularly this one of what is it like to be in these bodies and to have this shape, and to give ourselves the hard time we give us, and how might we implant a seed of a different story of miraculousness and appreciation, and how might we then begin treating ourselves differently and acting differently and having a different voice embedded in our mind to love us. And sorry, I just feel like it's so clear to me in this moment, my relationship to myself determines the way that I treat other people as well. So if I have this narrative of not enoughness and more and something wrong all the time and never quite rightness, how on earth am I going to treat other people with the kind of love that I intend if I haven't found a place to ask this question in myself? Could you just love me like this? If I can't be that way with myself, and or at least have that little door open to be that way with myself, all of my judgments, all of my self-assessment will just seep into all the ways that I treat and actually experience other people into my world. And this is such an incredible place to start. Loving other people is right with this.
I'm so glad you're saying that. Because I realize I've been thinking about exactly this a little bit since seeing Hollie's poem earlier in the week, which is the ways in which, when I'm most demanding that I be different, I'm most demanding that other people be different too. And it all loops back on itself in a very complicated way, which goes something like, well, if they're different, then I'll be loved again. Sort of the demand that everything change, and then I'll be able to feel at home. I have to change, they have to change. And I think that what we are mostly calling out to from one another is also the last line of Hollie's poem. Could you just love me this way? So many of our attempts to correct one another, which are the same as you're saying, Lizzie, as the attempts to correct ourselves, result in us keeping going this dynamic of not okayness, which is the source of so much of our actions towards one another that are painful, hurtful, destructive, not seeing. And I'm so struck by the absence of demand in Hollie's language here that we were pointing at before, that when we're quiet enough, we can see this. We can't demand that other people love us this way, and we can't demand that we love us. If I was any better, I would love myself this way. Comes from a different direction. And
what if we just went round? What if we just went round, Justin, and experienced people saying to us, whatever they're saying, could you just love me like this? What if that was the story that we had about why people were doing what they were doing and what they were doing? Could you just love me like this?
Well, it struck me that this might be a wonderful practice for any of us who are struggling to hear this call from our own bodies. That the first thing to do might be to practice looking at other people this way. So first of all, is exactly what you're saying, to get that in so much of the difficulty between people in the world, this is what other people are asking and not getting, which is why we keep going. But could we also bring our loving attention to the bodies of others in appreciation, just out on the street, in the supermarket, on the train, that we could start to look with a appreciative, gentle, loving gaze at the miracle of all the bodies around us, and start to reteach ourselves the loveliness of people, which we have been taught out of by, in a way that's getting more and more intense. Somebody was telling me yesterday about all of the different filters and tools you can have on social media to make yourself thinner, taller, less wrinkly, more glowy, to bring out your cheekbones, all these automated tools that will do it so that I can present myself. So all of this, I'm proposing that we take up the conscious practice of reteaching ourselves with every single person that we met of the beauty of living beings, simply because they are. And then maybe that way, if we will do this again and again and again, we'll also start to hear past our own harsh inner criticism and start to see how this is true of us too. And I'm sort of landing in this because of your observation that it doesn't end with us. And I think probably it doesn't start with us either. It's which brings forth which, both at the same time.
Yeah. And it's also striking me, Justin, about when we're unwell, when my body isn't doing what I want it to do. Currently, my body's not doing what I want it to do in a very minor way, but it could be in a very major way as well. What might be the healing possible if we could love ourselves just like this in any moment and bring love to whatever is happening, rather than, I know for myself, I get into this cycle of like, I wish it wasn't this way. I hate it that my body's doing this. It's not fair, whatever. And that goes from like, when I've been really, really unwell to minorly unwell. The pattern of self-hatred and frustration and anger is really different to, could you just love me like this? And because of all the ways that we've moved away from ourselves, sneeze.
Bless you.
That's good timing that my body and my mute finger, so you didn't all have to hear it. But can I love what my body's doing now, which is starting to work something out? I don't know what's going on really. But it strikes me that the more we hate on ourselves, the more the cycle continues of this unwellness that can manifest as physical unwellness and or emotional unwellness or relational unwellness. And this presence and this voice of whispering, gentle, loving kindness is a whole different approach to what we've, or so many narratives that I can think of in this moment that stop us from being kind and stop us from healing and stop us from breaking cycles of the way we've always talked to ourselves and maybe have been talked to in our lives by other people as well. So I'm noticing the time and realizing that it's my job to end today. Justin, I know that you had emailed me and said that you wanted to talk about your program coming up, as well as one other thing that I now can't remember. Would you like to say some things?
Yes, I'm going to mention these two, and then this will be relevant for anyone who's watching this in around December 2018. If you're coming to this later, the date will have passed. But I will post this in the Turning Towards Life group as well. I am going to be leading our Introduction to Coaching course, 2-day, wonderful program in Hammersmith in London in January. Something in the 20s of January, and I don't have the date in front of me at the moment. When we still have some spaces, and would be so pleased if some of you decided to join us. But also the same week, at the weekend, we are opening the doors of our professional coaching course for people who want to be guest clients, who would like to come in for the day on a Saturday and be coached by some of the participants on the program who are just past halfway through the program. And we have some places for that too. And if you're interested in either of those, check out the thirdspacecoaching.com website, which is where you can always find details of the programs and openings that we're running. And we'll post it in the Turning Towards Life Facebook group this morning as well.
And also one other really exciting thing is me and Hollie, who wrote this poem. Hollie is my sister, Hollie Holden. We are beginning a monthly gathering in Hammersmith in January. The first one is January the 14th. It's at a place, lovely place called Recenter in Hammersmith. And it's from 7 till 9 p.m. on the 14th of January is our first one. And the event on Facebook, which I'll also post here, has all the series of events. I think we've booked dates in up until July. And we will be gathering in circle to be with one another in this very conversational, gentle, receptive way. And we would love anybody to join us who would like to come and be with us.
Okay, so the dates are the 14th, did you say?
Yeah.
14th of January for Lizzie and Hollie's evening event at Recenter, and then 21st to 22nd of January is the Foundations for Coaching program, which is called Coaching to Excellence on the Third Space website, and Saturday the 26th of January, Coaching as a Guest Client in London. And we would welcome you with huge open arms and hearts to any of those. We'd love to get to meet you and see you.
Oh, one other thing is that the name of our group is called Turning Towards Love, which is a mixture of turning towards life and presence of love, which is Hollie's group's called Presence of Love. Ours is called Turning Towards Life. So we've done a very clever thing called it Turning Towards Love as our combined project. We're very excited about that. So anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for being with us and listening. And we have thoroughly enjoyed being with you on this conversation, as on every single one. We are so grateful to have this practice and this routine of coming to this same place once a week. Thank you so much. And we'll be back here next Sunday. Is that true? Yes, it's be the 23rd of December. We'll be back next Sunday. And until then, we wish you a very wonderful week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.